Hello, Namaste, Hare Krishna. This is talk number 8 in our series. We are talking about the infinitely powerful Godhead. Now, up until now, we've been talking about the relationship of the intellect, the consciousness, to knowledge, and our knowledge is shrunken, it's limited, it's compacted into a space which is bound by the senses, beyond which we can't reach. We can't hang our coat, so to speak, on a hook that is beyond our reach. We cannot see above a certain ceiling. We are confronted with an invisible wall, and this prevents us from seeing reality as it is. And then we talked about how reality can be perceived in two ways. Another Sanskrit word is prokta and aparokta, and they mean that one way in which you can perceive higher things, higher reality, is through the Vedas, and another way is through realization, the realization which comes from deep spiritual practice, which is very important. Both things will lead to the same goal. Last time we talked about the deep trance, the deep trance of Srila Vyasadeva, how he went into trance and he saw reality as it was, as it is, and he called it Advaya Gyan. We have this beautiful verse, Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yaj Gyanam Advayam, non-dual knowledge. He saw that knowledge is non-dual, the field of reality, complete, utter knowledge, free from any inebriety or restriction, is non-dual. But the word here is Advaya Gyan, not ekatvam, which is oneness. Not a oneness, stops short of being a oneness, but it's a non-duality. So then we talked about how he saw the Godhead and Maya, the manifestation of the bewildering potency of Godhead, the Mohana, the magic, the attractive magic of Maya standing separate. And he saw the Jiva bewildered. So today we're just going to talk a little bit more about that. You will remember that the Vedas, particularly the Upanishads, like to give us very colorful, natural descriptions of things that we see in this world, which will help us to understand the transcendental reality. Now, how far away is the sun? 93 million miles. 93 million miles. How hot is the sun? You know? I looked it up. The surface of the sun is 5,500 degrees centigrade. The inside of the sun is 15 million degrees centigrade. The sun is streaming sunshine everywhere throughout the universe. If you were to walk from the surface of the sun to the center of the sun, you would get to a certain spot where the fusion begins of hydrogen, which creates all the light that we see. Now, the sun is a very common thing. Every language has a word for the sun. Everybody sees it every day. So the Upanishads, turn to the sun for an understanding of the Godhead, or Parampurusha. And that is that the sun gives off energy, and the energy of the sun's heat and light, are dependent on the sun. The sun is not dependent on the heat and light. And just as the illumination of the sun is situated in one place. So the energies of Para Brahman, or as we might say in old German and in English, God, are spread all over the universe. The reason why the word God is problematic for us, of course, is because it's overlain with Christian theological understandings, and it may not suit us at this current moment, so we skip the word God in favor of words that are more Vedic in origin. So we talked about energies of God and we talked about God. So there are two energies. There are spirit and matter. One is superior, one is inferior. This is described by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. The one is uppermost or superior, and one is lower or inferior. It's not to demean matter, but it just means that matter is of a different order. It's always in a state of flux, and it's dependent on spirit for its reality. Spirit is eternal. It's never degraded by change or time. Matter is always changing. The composition of the elements that make up shapes and forms in the material world are always changing. I'm changing, you're changing. Our body is changing every day. If you don't look in a mirror for 5 years and you come back after 5 years, you'll be surprised. And the older you are, the more you're surprised every week at the disintegration of the material elements that make up your body. So Krishna describes matter, or atoms and molecules, as bina, separated. Bina prakriti. Prakriti means energy or matter, or the matter that is energy, the energy that manifests in matter. He says it's bina, it's separated from him. And the scriptures give us a very nice understanding of that. First is the cow that gives milk. So when a cow is standing in a field, you can point at the cow and you say, here's a cow. You don't say, here is a cow and milk and cow dung and cow urine and the half-digested contents of the cow. We don't have X-ray vision. We just point to the cow and we say, here's a cow. When the milk has been fed to a calf, or the milk has been milked, we say, here's a cow and here is milk. The milk is the energy of the cow that has been expressed. Now we have two things. The milk is non-different from the cow at one point, but when it's outside the cow, we differentiate. It's bina, or separated energy. Similarly, when God creates matter, when Parampurusha creates matter, it comes out from spirit, but as a separated energy. And because it's a separated energy and dependent on the higher energy, it's described as inferior. So the second example is of a spider and a web, and I love this one. I love the cow and the milk one, but I love the spider and the web. Now, spiders are fantastic creatures. They've got 8 legs, as you know, and they can spin webs. And they catch flies and they eat the flies. That's the way nature has arranged it, and not my business to complain about that spiders are not vegetarian. God made them that way. But in their web, there's 2 distinct qualities in the web. The web is made of, the thread of which the web is made comes out in 2 forms. One is crystalline and one is amorphous. It's a protein called a spidroin, made of amino acids, and one is crystalline and one is amorphous, and the crystalline one gives it high tensile strength, and the amorphous one gives it makes it stretchy. You can pull it and you won't break it. It's pliable. But a spider, and usually a female spider, can spin a web and catch a fly, and when the web gets dirty, she can eat the web, and immediately her stomach will begin dissolving the protein in the web and send the amino acids to her little bag where she creates silken strands again. And in this way, in one night, she can eat a web, and in the morning she'll be spinning that web again. And remember last time we were talking about Tantra and Tantunabi. The Sanskrit word for spider is Tantunaba, that which weaves out of its belly button weaver. Well, it's not quite the belly button, but it probably didn't look quite close. So inside the spider, the web exists as a potential. When we see a spider, if you're afraid of spiders, but when you see a spider, you don't say, here's a spider in a web, and a web. You say, here's a spider. But the web is existing inside the spider, even as you point at the spider, and then the spider creates a web, and now there's two things. It exudes it. So, in the same way, Parampurusha or Brahman can produce an entire cosmos. And after the entire cosmos, just like a spider who never becomes caught up in her own web, so Para Brahman or Parampurusha creates the whole cosmos and never becomes caught up in it. That's because it's not sticky. The web is not sticky for a spider, and the material nature is not sticky for Parampurusha. You follow? So even if you see that, the incarnation of God comes down to this world, it looks as if his body is made of matter. It's not made of matter. Don't think that way. But that's for another time. So again, that Supreme Brahman can pull everything back. He can eat the entire cosmos and digest it as if it were nothing. So at one point there is spirit, then there's spirit and matter, and then after that there's only spirit again. So there's only two principles, spirit and matter. Well, then it gets a little more complex, because we talk about the soul, Brahman, and matter. We talk about the soul as being in between, and that it is dependent upon the Supreme Spirit. So now we have spirit, which is God, spirit, which is the soul, same in quality, same spiritual quality, but different in quantity. Just like I have a spark and I have a big fire, the spark is also fire, but it's different in quantity. So in Sanskrit, this relationship of one thing being dependent on the other is called Swatantra, Paratantra. Swa means self, so self. Tantra in this form means woven. So self-woven, self-created. And Paratantra means created by the other. So the existence of the other is dependent on the one whose existence is dependent on himself. Swatantra, Paratantra. Or independent, dependent. So there is a famous verse from both the Katha Upanishad and the Svatashvatara Upanishad. You will know this one, I hope. Nityo Nityanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam, Eko Bahunam, Yo Vidadati Kaman, Tam Atmastam Ye, Nupashanti Dhiras, Tesham Shanti Saswati Netare Sham. There is one eternal amongst many eternals, one conscious entity among many conscious entities. The difference is that the one is the maintainer of all the others. Very important verse. So sometimes we read verses in the Upanishads that will tend to make us think that it's all one, that everything is one. And in one sense, it is all one. Just like the spider when she hasn't spun the web, just like the cow when the milk is still within her, it's all one. The milk is the cow and the spider's web is the spider, and it's all one. But when they separate their energy, then we say, no, there is two. So in one sense, we are one with God. We're completely one with God because we've come out of the body of God. But we can never be said to be the same as. Oneness does not mean the same as, because Swatantra, Paratantra, we are dependent, and Brahman is independent completely. So now, instead of just having spirit and matter, we seem to have two. The two becomes three. Spirit, which is of two orders, the individual soul, the tiny, tiny little soul, and the great, great, great Godhead. That's Swatantra, Paratantra. And matter, this thing called matter. And when we talk about these three things, we say three realities, or Tattva Traya, the three truths. And they are related to each other. And according to the school of philosophy that you belong to, you will have an opinion about how these three truths relate to each other. And these three truths are given different names, and you will find them, and sometimes it'll be confusing because Prabhupada, in his writings, he uses them interchangeably almost. And I want to list a few ways in which he explains these three truths. The first is internal energy, external energy, that's spirit and matter. Matter, or the material world, is known as the external energy. Why? Because it's external to Krishna, external to God, external to Brahman. The spider spins a web, and the web now becomes external energy. The cow gives milk, and then the milk becomes external energy. So there's internal, external, and marginal. Marginal energy is the energy of God that's suspended between matter and God, and that is the soul. It can go one way, or can go the other. The internal energy consists of the Supreme and all his expansions and incarnations, and the entirety of the infinite spiritual world. The external energy is the manifestation of the material elements combined to make up the perceivable world, and the marginal energy is me, you, the living being. So of the total radiation of energies that come from Para Brahman, 3/4 is the internal and only 1/4 of the external. Srila Prabhupada writes, here's a long bit, I'll just read it. The 75% expansion of his radiation is called his internal energy, whereas the 25% expansion is called the external energy of the Lord. The living entities who are residents of the spiritual as well as the material expansions are his marginal energy, and they are at liberty to live in either of the energies, external or internal. Freedom. We have freedom. We have the freedom, Prabhupada says, of a football that has been kicked by one boy and is sailing through the air. And as it gets to the top of the curve, football curve, right here it says, I'm free, I'm flying. But actually he's just being kicked. This is the jiva in material energy. He's not free at all. But he thinks he's free. Now, the reason why we talk in terms of percentages is because sometimes it is imagined, just like, you know, the story of the frog in the well. Everybody knows that story. It's a great story, Bengali story, that once there was a frog in the well, at the bottom of the well, dark well, and he heard a plop beside him. And his friend frog had come back from seeing the Indian Ocean. And the frog said, "I've just been to the Indian Ocean." He said, "Oh, what was that like?" "Well, is it made of water?" He said, "Yes, it's made of water." "Well, is it the same size as this well?" He said, "No, bigger." He said, "Well, it was twice the size of this well?" "No, much bigger." Come on, is it 3 times the size of this well?" And as he was asking how big it was, he was puffing his body out like this. Eventually he popped, because he could not expand his awareness of size to cope with anything more than the size of his confined life. So the Shastra, the scriptures, the Vedas, tell us that actually 75% of reality, now how they measure this I do not know, but 75% of reality, this is just for us frogs who are stuck here in the well, 75% of everything that exists is the spiritual world, and only 25%, that means even China, Brazil, Canada, Greenland, Australia, Africa, the Middle East, Japan, all of it together is only a very, very small speck in the whole of the cosmos, and that cosmos is only 25% of the radiation of the Para Brahman. Prabhupada continues, those who live within the spiritual expansion of the Lord are called liberated souls, whereas the residents of the external expansion are called conditioned souls. We can just make an estimate of the number of the residents of the internal expansions in comparison with the number of residents in the external energy, internal and external, and may easily conclude that the liberated souls are far more numerous than the conditioned souls, yes. So basically, don't go thinking that Vaikuntha, or the spiritual world, is a small place. There's only a limited number of people that can go there. No, practically unlimited. And this is a mere speck. So the individual soul, and here comes another word. There's another range of 3. So far we've had internal, external, marginal. Let's go on to another list of 3 now. Sorry if this gets confusing. The soul is also known as Tatastha Shakti. Tatastha means a beach, or Tata means beach. Sta means situated. So the Shakti that is situated as if on a beach. Why as if on a beach? Because if you imagine a tiny little crab, and sometimes it's sitting in the sun, sometimes it's covered by waves, sometimes it's sitting in the sun, sometimes covered by waves, because he's on the beach, and the beach is half in, half out. So the tiny spirit soul is like that crab, sometimes covered by waves of material energy, sometimes sitting, basking in the sunlight of the internal energy, and we just like that. So we are Tatastha Shakti. But we suffer. So all energies in existence have their origin in God, and this is the very definition of God, the source of everything. An inexhaustible energetic source that never becomes depleted. So, another Bengali example. If I have 10 bananas, and I give 3 bananas to a friend, if John has 10 bananas, and he gives 3 bananas to Mary, how many bananas does John have? He has 7. remaining. His generosity, through his generosity, he's decreased his bananas and he's gained gratitude, but he's depleted his own stock. Similarly, if a woman gives birth to 3 children, she has the rewarding experience of a lifetime's loving exchange with those children, but as time passes by, she watches them grow into adults. She herself diminishes in strength and eventually dwindles and dies. This is material nature. As you create, in the end, you lose. However, the phenomenon of depletion or reduction is so common to us that we even project it onto Para Brahman. Even great philosophers mistakenly assume that if God manifests various energies for the creation of the universe, his stock of banana-like energies must be depleted. If God creates the world, God becomes depleted, and now he's not got anything left because he's given out all his energy. But no. If God manifests souls, some people think they must be eventually depleted, but no. We dealt with this last time. People think that God has broken himself into fragments, that the souls are fragments of God, and therefore the soul is God trying to find himself. No. The souls are separate from God. Remember, Swatantra, Paratantra. But the Upanishads are very clear. In the case of Brahman, 10 minus 3 equals 10. Okay? So that if John is Para Brahman and he gives away 3 to Mary, who is not, John still has 10. God still has 10. God never becomes depleted. No matter how much energy comes from him, he's infinite and inexhaustible. And so numberless souls come from God, still he remains eternally at full strength and power. Finally, each soul is also eternal, blissful, and cognizant. God's consciousness of himself remains as it is. So God never becomes forgetful. He never becomes influenced by the external energy, just as a spider never becomes caught up in the web. The web is sticky for everybody else, but not for the spider. So just as God is creating the web of the material universe, which is very sticky for us, it's not sticky for him. So the invocation to the Isha Upanishad begins. Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. That God is perfect and complete. Because he's completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever comes from the complete whole is complete in itself. Because he's a complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. That's like an old-fashioned way of saying he remains full. So without understanding that, people think that everything is spiritual, everything is God, and that the soul, when liberated, will become God. No way, it doesn't happen like that. We have to very seriously contemplate the repercussions of thinking like that. So here's another trap, to think that God is so completely different from the soul that the soul and God can never be truly related at all. So if you think that everything is God, that leads to nihilism. And if you think that the soul is so tiny and God is so great that the soul can never, ever, ever be related to God, that leads to existential crisis and a complete loss of hope. For us to really be reconnected to God, we must believe that there is a relationship that we are reviving, and that is Bhakti. No, let me rephrase that. We must not believe, we must understand the actual nature of the relationship. So the soul is simultaneously one with and different from God. You've heard that before. So being different and non-different from God, it is known as different hyphen non-different, or beta abeda. So beta beta, that is the beta abeda, different non-different. And because to have two states of existence where we are different but non-different from God is mentally inconceivable, it is known as achintya, or an inconceivable truth. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy is called achintya abeda beda, or beda abeda. So I want to read you now something which comes from, we won't be too long, I want to read you something from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he was trying to explain this to English people back in the 1890s, 1896. He thought, if I can get some of this understanding to Christians and intelligent people in the West, then they will appreciate the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he wrote something called the Gauranga Lila Smarana Mangala Stotram. And it's just what we've just been talking about, but in his words. By infinite powers must be meant powers which knows no bounds, either in space or in time, as his powers alone created space and time. His powers are identified with his person. In material objects, there is a difference between the person and its powers, between the thing and its attributes, its name, its form, and its action. These are different things. My name, my shape, and my activity, these are all different things. But it is a spiritual truth that in spirit, the thing is identical with its name, form, attributes, and action. This truth cannot be subjected to dry reason, which deals with gross matter alone. Krishna is supreme will in himself, and he exercises his supreme power at his pleasure, which submits to no law, because all law has proceeded from his will and power. Power is known from its exercise. In other words, when you see the power of God, you'll know the power of God. In this world, we have experience of only 3 of the attributes of his power. We see the material phenomena, and we understand that his power has the attribute to create matter. This attribute is styled in the Vedas as Maya Shakti. Remember, last time we talked about Maya Shakti. She's creating the world. We see man, and we understand that the supreme power has the attribute to produce limited and imperfect souls. The Shastras call that attribute as Jiva Shakti. We conceive of one who is spiritual and supreme in his realm of eternal spirits. We understand that his power has an attribute to exhibit perfectly spiritual existences. The Vedas call that attribute by the name of Atma Shakti or Chit Shakti. All these attributes together form one supreme power, which the Vedas call as Para Shakti. In fact, power, Shakti, is not distinguishable from the person of that being. Still, the powers are separately exhibited in their separate actions. This is styled Achintya Beda Beda Prakash, or inconceivable, simultaneous existence of distinction and non-distinction. Hari, or God, being will above law, exercises his infinite powers while he himself remains unaffected. I do not know how many, if any, English people read that very deep philosophical piece of English writing there by the Thakur, and whether they were impressed or whether they wrote back to him. We think a couple did, but it's very, very deep. So, I want to read to you another couple of verses, and then we can conclude. Ekadesha stitasya gner jyotsna vistarini yata parasya brahmana shaktistatedam akilam jagad. Simple one. Just as the illumination of fire, situated in one place, is spread all over, the energies of the Supreme Brahman are spread throughout the universe. That comes from the Vishnu Purana, and we talked about that, about heat and light from the sun. Vedanta says, Shakti Shakti Matayora Veda. The Shaktiman, or the person who exudes Shakti or energy, is non-different from the Shakti. So we talked about two energies, didn't we? Purusha and Prakriti. One way you can remember Prakriti, that the word Prakriti is derived from Kriti, to create something is Kriti, Prakriti, and pra meaning for creation, as in the Latin word pro. I'm pro something, anti something. So pro, I'm for creation, Prakriti. Prakriti is that which is subject to being transformed or always in a state of flux. That's known as matter. And Purusha is the higher nature of Prakriti. Now, dull matter can never create. Matter can only appear to create when it's touched by a higher energy. So if the body is not touched by the soul, if the soul is not in the body, then the body cannot do anything. Prabhupada used to like the idea of the cold iron bar. It can't act in any other way except, smashing something. But if you put it in the flames of a fire, heat it up till it's red hot, it will burn like fire. So when a lower energy touches a higher energy, it can become transformed, it can act in a different way. So the nature of creating anything, we go on to the final thing, the nature of creating anything is that there's always a lower energy which is manipulated by a higher energy, and the higher energy has a desire to create in the world to do it. For example, to make a clay pot involves various causes. So there's the clay itself. Anybody ever done any clay pottery? Pot making? If you have, you'll know that you take a lump of clay and you apply higher energy to it. If you leave the clay as it is and don't touch it at all, nothing will manifest. But if you conceive of a shape that you would like the clay to be made into, and you apply your fingers and build it into that shape, then it's the higher will or volition creating a shape from dull clay. You bring it alive. It can function as a cup. So the material cause is known as that which is changed by something. That is known as the clay. And in Sanskrit that's called the upadan karana. Karana means cause, upadan means the material cause, that which is transformed. Then there's the efficient cause or causes. That's the potter, the wheel, etc. Nimitta karana. So if you have hands, that's nimitta karana. Upadan karana is the clay, nimitta karana is your hands. And then sukshma karana is the remote or subtle cause. What's that? Pointing to his head, he said, that's the desire. Let there be a cup. So let there be a cup, sukshma karana, nimitta karana, upadan karana. Then nimitta karana, I'm thinking of the cup, sukshma karana. Upadan karana is being shaped by my hands. I'm sure you all get that. And then the last and final idea, that the exuded energy of something will always be weaker than the source. So the photons, the light beams which come from the sun. They won't be of the same nature as the sun. The sun is very, very hot, but the sun's rays, although they can burn you, it's a different type of thing. They're not hot in themselves. They will transform you, but they're not as hot as the sun. If you come inside on a hot day and you say, "Oh, I think I've caught the sun," no, you haven't. The sun is 5,000 degrees centigrade. If you caught the sun, you'd be a crisp. So here's some more words that you might hear. This is God, the souls, and matter. God, souls, and matter. You might hear from somewhere in the Upanishads, you might hear God is the Preritara. The souls are Bhokta, those who enjoy, and matter is Bhogyam. God is Ishvara, the souls are Chit, and matter is Achit. So God is also known as Chit Shakti. The souls are known as Jiva Shakti. Matter is known as Maya Shakti. God is known as Brahman. Souls are known as Jiva. Matter is known as Maya. Like that. So there are different. So God is known as Antaranga Shakti, internal energy. Tatastha Shakti, marginal energy, the souls. And Bahiranga Shakti, external energy. God is known as spiritual potency. The jivas are known as the living being. And Prabhupada likes to call Maya, or the external energy, the illusory potency. So all through Prabhupada's books you'll get these three terms, so don't become confused. They mean the same thing, God, souls, and matter. Krishna is potent, and he has potencies. He is energetic, and he has energies. He is Shaktiman, and he has Shakti. So these terms are interchangeable. Vedanta Sutra says, Shakti, Shakti Matayor Abeda. The Shaktiman is non-different from the Shakti. Savishvakrit Vishvavidatma Yoni Gya Kalaskaro Guni Sarvavidyaha Platana Kshetragya Patir Gunesha Samsara Moksha Stitibandha Hetuhu. Last translation. He who is the support of both the unmanifested Prakriti and the Jiva, who is the Lord of the three gunas, and who is himself the cause of bondage, existence, and liberation from bondage or samsara, is verily the creator of the universe, the knower, the inmost self of all things, and the source, the omniscient